Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Aliana Kernodle. Pennsylvania Democrats will return to the State House in January with a one-seat majority intact. Joining me with more on this story is the Center Square's Pennsylvania editor, Kristen Smith. Kristen, what does this mean for state government?
After this one-seat majority was finally cemented, basically what that means is that nothing about the balance of power is going to change at the state level. Governor Josh Shapiro is still a Democrat. The Senate is still comfortably controlled by Republicans, and Democrats hold onto power in the House by one vote, which doesn't seem like a lot, but they are able to really wield that one vote to have a lot of power and to keep a tight control on the legislative calendar. Why is that important? Because essentially Senate Republicans and House Democrats are able to, for lack of a better word, cancel each other out when it comes to getting their biggest legislative priorities across the finish line. Governor Josh Shapiro's always kind of taken this stance where he wants everyone to work together. He's not afraid of divided government. If the two chambers can agree to a bill, he's most likely going to sign it. There's only been a couple instances of this not happening. Perhaps the most high-profile one was a deal for school choice expansion that Senate Republicans had approved and had actually drafted based or with Shapiro's involvement. They put it in a budget that managed to find its way to the governor's desk. But when push came to shove, Shapiro did not go against his party and vetoed that school choice program. So that's why I add that caveat in there, because Shapiro can put his thumb on the scale when it matters most to Democrats. That being said, he hasn't had to do that all that often so far. But we have another 2 years of this. And so we don't know what we don't know. You know, things are bound to come up. We always have this vague idea in our mind of what the different chambers are going to want to get done and where we think Shapiro stands on it. But as always, there's this kind of politicking going on behind the back, in the back doors, in the recesses of the legislative chambers that we just don't have insight into. And those deals are made, and sometimes what they come out with is not what we would expect. But that balance of power can really tell us a lot, can help us get a sense of where things are going to go.
And how have party leaders responded to the results?
It seems like depending on which party you're in and which chamber you're in, that gives you kind of what you would expect. So in the House, Democrats aren't changing anything about their leadership structure. They feel confident and good about what their priorities are because they've returned the majority, small as it is. And what's important is they held on to that majority, even though at the statewide and federal level, Republicans won resoundingly. All the statewide offices, Republicans got 5-6 percentage points more than the Democratic candidates. Obviously, Trump beat Kamala Harris. In our U.S. Senate race, although close, it looks like McCormick, or it is certain that McCormick is going to come out on top there. So the fact that Republicans weren't able to turn around and make this a Republican majority in the House, I think has really reinforced Democrats feeling that what they have done has been right for voters. And so they're not really going to change anything. On the other hand, House Republicans have had a big shakeup in their leadership and made the comment earlier this week that, they're really going to listen to voters and try really hard to kind of reiterate the message that you're hearing from Trump on down about how does this impact our wallets? How can we make life more affordable? How can we make Pennsylvania a place that people actually want to stay in? So that's where their messaging is changing. Now, up at the Senate level, you kind of have the inverse going on. Republicans aren't really changing anything. They see themselves as, the firewall between House Democrats' really big spending goals and, protecting taxpayers from an increase in taxes as they see it. So they're not going to change anything about what they've been doing. They have really pushed school choice expansion for years, but I don't know. House Democrats really aren't on board with that. So I don't think we're likely to see changes. They want voter ID laws. That's not been something they've been able to come together on, even when they control both chambers. There's their priorities that they just will likely fall flat because Shapiro can, like I said, put his thumb on the scale. In the meantime, Senate Democrats made a few changes to their leadership. But again, they have always kind of been in the background, given the fact that they have 6 fewer members than Senate Republicans. So their weight is much less heavy in the Senate than it would be for Republicans in the House.
And what issues are likely to be sticking points in this coming session?
So the big issue every year around budget season is how much money are we going to spend on public education? Last two budgets, House Democrats and Shapiro got a lot of money for public education, a lot more than Senate Republicans likely wanted. In fact, last budget cycle, there was more than $864 million appropriated to basic education. And so that's a huge number. The year before that, it was $560 million-ish. So we're spending a lot of money on public education. And that's not something that either party disagrees with necessarily. It's just that Republicans are worried about increasing at such high rates so quickly. They're worried that maybe sustaining that level of funding might be hard going forward. And then what do they do to balance the budget? And that's where the fear of tax hikes comes in. The other big issue that seems to loom again is, will we have election reform? They've been grasping at straws there for 4 years, have been unable to come together on it. This election went smoother than I think a lot of county election boards maybe anticipated. So will the push for election reform be as strong this time around? It's uncertain, but we'll see. Then, of course, there's always questions about where will school choice go. Senate Republicans, they control the chamber there. So again, it's always a big legislative priority for them. They let it really fall on the back burner this last cycle, really let House Democrats and Shapiro kind of lead the charge when it comes to what we spend our money on. Now, what's interesting, too, about the power dynamics here is that House Republicans, when they were talking about their leadership shakeup, they said something that was very similar to what House Democrats and the governor have been saying, which is, how can we take more of the money that taxpayers have given to the state and turn around and give it back to them? We have billions in surplus and in our savings account, our emergency savings account. Republicans have long said we need to keep that account secure because, the economy is really uncertain, especially post-pandemic. Democrats have said, no, let's give some of that money back in specific ways. Some of it is spending more money on education. Others, they propose tax credits, things that would be popular with Pennsylvanians. However, there just hasn't been agreement. I'm not saying that House Republicans are suddenly going to say, let's boost the EITC and the child care tax credit and all these things for Pennsylvania families. But there seems to be an acknowledgement from their leadership team that we have to find, or that they have to find ways to give back to the taxpayer that's been supporting them.
Well, Kristen, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.